Hey and welcome! In this series I am doing a deep dive in certain Heritage Ship cosmetics that are available for Sea of Thieves. Aside from just looking beautiful, quite a few of them are inspired by past rare video games. In this video we will have a look at the Fightin Frogs Ship set, which is based on the Battletoads franchise. You can get this ship for free if you play Act 1 of the new Battletoads game, which is also available on Game Pass. But if you buy this game and get a free Heritage ship, it is actually cheaper than buying just a Heritage ship from the Pirate Emporium. So yeah, the other ones are totally not overpriced at all. So before we have a look at the ship and all its references, let's have a look at the Battletoads franchise first. In the late 80s and early 90s, Rare was pumping out NES games left and right. After having worked on WWF, a wrestling game turned beat 'em up, the developers felt a bit constricted working on these known franchises all the time. Inspired by Pond Life or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, depending on who you ask, the team designed 3 anthropomorphic toads called Rash, Zitz and Pimple, along with a slew of mean-looking baddies. Their first game released for the NES and was simply called Battletoads. The plot was also simple: defeat the evil Dark Queen and rescue Pimple and Princess Angelica. The game wasn't just a beat 'em up, but contained a lot of platforming and auto-scrolling sections, the Turbo Tunnel being the most notorious one. It has a great soundtrack made by none other than David Wise, who you might know from being one of the composers for the Donkey Kong Country series. It's also one of the hardest games ever made. 2 years later, a crossover game featuring Double Dragon also came out for the NES. Coincidentally, this game is also one of the hardest NES games ever made. 3 Battletoad games were also released for the original Game Boy. These included a sequel, simply called Battletoads, which also featured the same box art as the NES game, because that's not confusing at all. And a remake of the original NES game, but that one is called Ragnarok's World, adding even more confusion. And of course, another crossover game with Double Dragon. A 4th Battletoads Game Boy game was at one point in development, but got cancelled since people became less interested in the Game Boy. Luckily, there is still some footage of the game, which is shown on the screen right now.
And it looked wonderful, and it was a spin-off from a coin-op arcade game.
It might go without saying, but these Game Boy games are among the hardest Game Boy games ever made. Another semi-remake slash sequel called Battlemaniacs was made for the SNES, which doesn't feature any continues, so if you have some money to spare and want to have a bad time, hey, you can try out this one. The obligatory Double Dragon crossover game for the SNES is a bit more approachable, since it plays more like a beat 'em up, while Battlemaniacs featured a ton of other unforgiving gameplay sections. Both of them are still some of the hardest NES games ever made. Of course, the best Battletoads experience back then wasn't found on the Game Boy, SNES or even the NES. The most definitive old school Battletoads game to me is still the arcade. No small thanks to legendary programmer Chris Sutherland. With this version, the team really could go to town with better sprite work, animation and sound, but most notably putting nipples on the Dark Queen's design. Like I said, best version ever. It's also one of the hardest arcade games ever made. After this, it took 26 years for a new Battletoads game to appear. This game, simply called Battletoads, again, was co-developed with the Lala Studios and meant for a more modern, cartoony style. The Dark Queen's design changed and nipples got removed, which angered fans all over the world.
Dark Queen? You look different than I remember.
At the moment, this game doesn't have online multiplayer. This is a real bummer, but overall my first impressions are mainly positive. So if you're interested or just want the Fightin Frogs Ship set, Be sure to check this one out. And finally, it might be worth mentioning that Toads also made some appearances in both Killer Instinct and Shovel Knight. I am fortunate enough to have played all released Battletoads games, but the only ones I can truly recommend are the original arcade version and their latest iteration for the Xbox One. The main reason being, these are the most doable, with their latest game adding a difficulty selection for the first time. If you want to try the original NES or SNES games, you need to have a particular mindset if you hope to complete them. But if you like pain and broken controllers, you can't go wrong with Battletoads. And if you want the old school experience without the headache, you can always play the NES and the arcade game on Rare Replay, where you can turn back time Prince of Persia style whenever you make a mistake, which will happen a lot. So, with this history lesson behind us, let's now focus on the ship set. The ship is called the Fightin Frogs, which is a bit odd, since they are toads. And to be honest, I don't get it. Yes, the toads sometimes get confused as frogs, but I still think it's weird. The painting found on Snake Island addresses this confusion, and to be honest, I'm not really that bothered by it. When looking at the ship, you can clearly see the Battletoads logo everywhere. It's on the flag, it's on the wheel, on the hull, on the capstan, on each sail, and of course on the butt of the cannons. Not only this, but there are also spikes everywhere. This is not only there to look cool, but also a reminder of their old design, where the toads often wore spiked armbands and knee pads. The description of the hull reads: "This paint seems to give your ship a boost of amphibious power, but don't try to take it on land." And of course, I think most of us know that both frogs and toads are amphibians. The description of the wheel reads: "The wheel of choice for any ship that wants to look mean and green." A fitting description, because each toad is essentially a lean, mean and green fighting machine. The wheel also uses a fist as its middle peg. Often various body parts of the toad transform into something else, and their fist growing large has been a staple since the very first game. The other pegs also have this red cloth around them, and Rash is actually wearing the same type of cloth around his arm in their latest games. It could be a reference, but I could also be looking too far into it. But I don't care. Speaking about Rash, there is a direct hint to him when you read the description of the capstan. It reads: "The capstan's frog ornaments look real enough to give you a nasty rash." The capstan also depicts all the frogs, or all the toads, on top of it. They are easily recognized since each has its own color. A fun thing to note is in the beginning the toads kinda looked similar to each other, but over time they became more recognizable as individual characters. The cannons look absolutely amazing, and they are even shaped like giant fists. Anyways, the description of the cannons reads: "These mighty cannons pack a real punch, capable of blasting away the darkest of foes." And of course, the darkest of foes is naturally meant to be the Dark Queen. It's a bit of a bummer that all of the sails on the galleon look very similar. It's just a logo on all of them, but oh well. The description of them reads: "These sails were created by 3 friends, famous for their fighting skills and skin conditions." It's actually funny since this description calls them friends, but some people think they are brothers. But according to the first game's backstory, the Battletoads were originally human roommates. The description also talks about skin conditions, and this is obviously done because of their names.
I dub you Zitz, and from now on, you are Rash, and you shall be called Pimple.
You're putting us on, right?
The flag isn't that special since it's just a logo again, but its description reads: "Reds have a mysterious aversion to ships that fly this flag," which is fitting since reds have been a recurring enemy since their very first game. And finally we have the figurehead. It looks awesome, depicting all 3 toads, and it even glows in the dark, which makes it double awesome. I mean, that's just science. The description of the figurehead reads: Frogs were once revered as warrior spirits by the ancients, invoke their fighting power. Pretty self-explanatory description. And I would also like to note that one of the frogs, Zitz, is holding a sword. This is fitting since Zitz is actually regarded as the leader of the group. Sadly, we don't have any collector's sales or collector's figurehead for this ship. Maybe they will release them later, or maybe this ship will eventually be available in the Pirate Emporium. Which would be weird since it could become more expensive than a new Battletoads game. But we'll just have to wait and see. So, hopefully you liked this video. I hope it was both entertaining and informative. A thumbs up is always appreciated. And remember, you just need to play Act 1 of the new Battletoads game and you will automatically get this ship set the next time you play Sea of Thieves. So, are you going to smash some baddies and sail the seas in style? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, thanks for watching my stuff and I will see you in the next video. Take care.
Well. Okay.
Blow out the birthday candle!